Hello and welcome back to The Wellness Pharmacist. I'm your host, Dr. Kat, and today we are reviewing some complex health topics and making them more accessible and more bite-sized pieces to those living with chronic illness and, of course, healthcare practitioners. Today we are reviewing a lupus research article about how the innate immune system plays a crucial role in this autoimmune disease. A recent article was published in the Journal of Clinical Rheumatology, March of 2025, titled Just Autoimmunity: The Role of the Innate Immune Response in Lupus. And researchers highlight how innate immune system dysfunction plays a significant role in triggering and then sustaining lupus flares. So what is the innate immune system first and foremost for those that are listening? So this is a brief crash course. Briefly, our immune system fights pathogens that would otherwise make us sick. It fights germs on the skin, bodily fluids like blood, and of course the tissues inside our bodies. It's divided into two distinct systems. We have the general system called the innate immune system, and then we have the specialized system, the adaptive immune system. They do work closely together, but they are assigned different tasks in our bodies. The innate immune system is our earliest line of defense. It responds to invaders in the same way every time, which is fast and furious. So when we get a cut, let's say, within hours of getting that cut, the innate immune system will detect it and then try and fight it. However, sometimes it isn't as successful as we'd like it to be, and then the infection spreads. There are three major parts to the innate immune system. We have the skin and mucous membranes. Then we have the immune system cells and proteins or enzymes, such as phagocytes, which are basically macrophages. Macrophages develop from monocytes. So we have things that digest bacteria. We call those phagocytes. We also have eosinophils, basophils, the complement system, and cytokines. Then we have the third part, we have natural killer cells. Roughly what happens is when we get a cut, we get inflammation, redness, irritation, pain, which then drives these phagocytes to the invaders. These phagocytes are specialized white blood cells. They are scavengers that are in our bodies, our bloodstream. And their job is to gobble up the germs that invade us and digest them. Once they're digested, they present the remains of that bacteria on the surface, okay, of the phagocytes, like the macrophages. So they present it on their surfaces for the adaptive immune system to kick in. So it's like a domino effect. Our skin and mucous membranes are one part of the innate protective system that keeps unwanted pathogens out of our bodies through barrier methods like our skin. So as long as our skin remains intact, we don't have cuts, our skin is teeming with bacteria. So the skin is a natural barrier to bacteria getting inside our bodies. Another protective mechanism is the acidity levels of our bodily fluids. So it can prevent urinary tract infections and the like. That's our first line of protection, innate immune system. The other half of the innate, or the other third actually, part of the innate response are natural killer cells, as I've spoken about. These are fully formed and ready to kill right off the bat. So the other ones I talked about, the macrophages, the eosinophils, basophils, they're born and they have to mature. Natural killer cells, when they're, quote, I call them born, when they're developed, they're fully formed and they're ready to just attack and destroy. They are important in viral infections and in cancer. So they eat holes, they punch holes in the outer membranes of those types of cells, viruses and cancer, and then try and destroy them. In a nutshell, the innate immune system recognizes the most common structural components of viruses and living cells like bacteria, fungi, and protozoans. The cells of the innate system, so we have dendritic cells, macrophages, eosinophils, basophils, those that I've described before, which we talked about as antigen-presenting cells. So again, they present on the outside of their cell. And then we have receptors called toll-like receptors. We have 1 through 10. They're numbered 1 through 10. Toll-like receptor 1, toll-like receptor 2, so on and so forth. That then recognize the most common pathogens and then respond. The adaptive immune system is more complex. So it fights germs directly. If the pathogens get past this first innate immune system response, then the adaptive system kicks in. Since it targets a specific germ, it takes longer to react than the innate response. However, it's more accurate. So instead of like the innate response is like blasting a cannon at something, every time it's the same thing, same response every time. Instead, with the adaptive system, we use like a scalpel. Like we know exactly what we're going at. Okay. One advantage to the adaptive system is that it remembers invaders so that the next time we get invaded by a particular pathogen again, we are better able to combat it. The adaptive system is made up of T cells, B cells, and antibodies. And it's the antibodies that remember so that when we get invaded again, we have these antibodies and then we're able to handle it better. The innate immune system, as I said, is our body's first line of defense against infections. But in certain situations, in certain disease states like lupus, it doesn't function normally. The study found that dysregulated toll-like receptors, okay, that I spoke about previously. So we have toll-like receptors 1 through 10. So if these are off in any kind of way, we have dysregulation of them. We have dysregulation of interferon pathways, so they're out of control, and dysregulation of neutrophils. Okay, this all contributes to increased inflammation, and when we have increased inflammation, we have tissue damage. So a statistical insight from this study is up to 80% of people living with lupus exhibit a persistent, constant type 1 interferon response. It's a key driver of inflammation in this disease. Okay, so I mentioned we have toll-like receptors out of whack, we have interferons that are out of control, and the neutrophils. So in this case, 80% of people living with lupus exhibit like this particular dysregulation of type 1 interferon response. Number 2, we have like neutrophils and what we call netosis, fueling the fire of this particular disease. So neutrophils, they're a type of white blood cell. They're supposed to help clear infections. They're supposed to be good, the good guys, right? However, in lupus, they undergo a process called netosis, N-E-T-osis, which is basically neutrophil cell death. They form neutrophil extracellular traps, NETs, N-E-T. These normally are part of our immune defense, but again, in lupus, it seems that the production goes a little wonky and they accumulate in people living with lupus. This also promotes the inflammatory pathways through interferons and cytokines, and then they attack our own tissues like our kidneys in lupus nephritis. So again, it's this domino effect of inflammation. A statistical insight from this study, elevated neutrophil extracellular traps, mouthful of words, otherwise known as NETs, were detected in nearly 90% of active lupus cases. Nearly 90%. When you see these elevations of these NETs, it means worsening disease progression. So clearly this is an area that needs more attention and potentially can be targeted for therapy options in the future. So yes, it's not great, but hey, they found it. And this is a potential therapy option in the future. Now we come to the complement system. And the complement system helps clear out dead cells and, of course, pathogens. So bacteria and the like. But in lupus, again, it's malfunctioning. Sometimes it's overactivating, and other times it's failing to clear out harmful immune complexes. This imbalance contributes to kidney damage, so lupus nephritis, and it worsens flares. A statistical insight, 50 to 60% of people living with lupus with kidney involvement show low complement levels. Not high, low complement levels, indicating disease activity. So if the complement levels are low from a simple blood test, that's what your physician is looking for. They're seeing how are the complement levels? Are they going lower? That means disease activity. Again, this is the innate immune system. What does this mean for people living with lupus? This research suggests that treatments targeting the innate immune system, not just the adaptive, could be key to managing lupus. So a lot of the medications that we have now, they either affect both, so like corticosteroids, so it's just going to drop both the innate and adaptive immune systems down to kind of help prevent that overactivation, or it really tends to focus on the adaptive response, the B cells, the T cells. New therapies in development focus on blocking interferon activity, such as anifrolumab. It's an interferon 1 receptor antagonist. They focus on regulating neutrophil function and then stabilizing the complement system, which is innate, the innate immune system, to reduce disease flares and organ damage. So we're getting more focus on this innate initial rapid response. And they're seeing some progress here. Okay, so one of my favorite parts is the listener question. And that's coming up. But what I want to ask you is, how do you think this changes your understanding of lupus, systemic lupus? Do you think that targeting the innate immune system could lead to better treatment options for you or someone you love? And this goes out to everybody, healthcare professionals included. I'd love a discussion about this. So reach out to me via social media or email. And I'm on Blue Sky. And obviously there's this, my email is innovationsmedicationmgmt@gmail.com. And let's have a discussion about this. I'd love to have another episode on this. Okay, so now on to the caller question. It says, "Hi, Dr. Kat. My name is Melanie from Ohio, and I've been living with lupus for over 10 years. I always thought lupus was just my immune system attacking itself, but this idea of the innate immune system being involved is really interesting. Does this mean that treatments like steroids and immunosuppressants might not be enough? Are there any new medications being developed that target this part of the immune system? Thanks so much for your podcast. I learn something new every time I listen." Thanks, Sarah. That's a fantastic question. I appreciate your question. You're absolutely right. So traditional lupus treatments can tend to focus, like I said, on the adaptive immune system. They do, like corticosteroids, immunosuppressants, they're suppressing generally the entire immune response, so adaptive and innate. However, because research now shows this innate immune system plays more of a major role in lupus, scientists are exploring new treatment options that specifically target this early immune response. For example, some newer therapies in development focus on blocking interferons, which are key players in the innate immune response. Drugs like anifrolumab, which is a mouthful for me, which is already FDA approved, work by inhibiting interferon pathways, reducing inflammation and disease flares. Researchers are also looking on like the toll-like receptor inhibitors, which could then prevent this overactivation of the innate immune response. While these advances, they're really exciting, it's important to remember that lupus is a complex disease, and so no single treatment works for everyone. If you're interested, though, in newer treatment options that are not necessarily out on the market, it's always a good idea to discuss them with your rheumatologist and see if there's any clinical trials available for you to join or newer therapies that might be right for you. As always, this information is for educational purposes only and does not imply treatment. Always seek the counsel of your healthcare team. Okay? And for all my listeners out there, what are your biggest frustrations when it comes to lupus treatment? Let me know, and I may cover it in a future episode. So, in wrap up, lupus isn't just about autoimmunity, it's a full body immune system imbalance that requires a broader treatment approach. As research evolves, so do the possibilities for better care and then better quality of life. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Wellness Pharmacist podcast. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered in your own health journey, and we'll talk soon.